U.S. aircraft once again fired weapons at two air defense sites in Iraq today after encountering some Iraqi violations in the southern no-fly zones, at least this according to Pentagon officials. There were no reports of activity over the northern zone, although patrols also were conducted there. And so the United States continues to attack Iraq. Today we're going to take a look at U.S. policy in Iraq over the last year and continue our interview with Christopher Hitchens. Christopher Hitchens has gained some notoriety over the last week as he signed an affidavit that the House managers are using to go after Sidney Blumenthal, the White House aide. Christopher Hitchens, a columnist and contributing editor at Vanity Fair and The Nation magazines, says that, yes, last year Sidney Blumenthal did tell him lies about Monica Lewinsky, spreading stories that the president had told him. Sidney Blumenthal, in his deposition last week, as well as his grand jury testimony, said he did not pass stories, lies about Monica Lewinsky on to reporters. So that saga continues, and it may be that President Clinton will be acquitted, but one of his underlings, one of his aides, will be charged with perjury. But right now, we'll turn to a piece that Christopher Hitchens has just written for Vanity Fair magazine. It'll be in the March issue, called Weapons of Mass Distraction, where he chronicles the last year's bombings, U.S. bombings, of the Sudan, Afghanistan, and Iraq, and compares them to the chronology of the impeachment proceedings. Yesterday, we heard him talking about Afghanistan and the Sudan, and he'll talk a little more about that, and then turn to the issue of Iraq. Just a reminder, the bombing of Sudan occurred when Monica Lewinsky gave her grand jury testimony, and President Clinton bombed Iraq in December, just hours before the impeachment debate was to begin. Almost immediately after President Clinton was impeached, he announced the end of Operation Desert Fox. One of the people you interviewed was Milt Bearden, who is the CIA chief of station in Sudan and also led the CIA effort in Afghanistan. His thoughts on all this?
Sometimes when you're a journalist, the thing you wish would happen or hope would happen just does happen. I was reading a review in the Washington Post of a novel called Black Tulip, a thriller, and it said that there was quite not a bad novel of the Tom Clancy type, better than Clancy actually, written by a CIA veteran called Milt Bearden, of whom I'd vaguely heard. And then there was an interview with the author, and it said, he's not your typical CIA man. He worked a long time in Afghanistan and Khartoum, and he describes as disgraceful the recent raids on the country. I thought, well, I'd like to find this guy. I'd also like to read his book. And I wonder if he'd go on the record. Well, it's one of those things that just proves out fine. He knew all about it. He knew the countries well. He knew the countryside well. He knew it by day and by night. He'd done covert operations there. And he said he simply could not believe, after all these years of his versions of professional expertise, the United States could just shower countries with missiles when they had no evidence of any activity there, when the samples that they claimed to take were unprofessionally done, when they had existing back channels, this is especially with Sudan, with which to communicate with the regime in case of need. And he said that it looked to him as if it was a promiscuous effort to create a sensation somewhere else, namely in the United States.
So that bombing on August 20th was...
I should say, in case you think those were Milt Bearden's own words, as I just started that, that's a very, I have to say, that's a very lax paraphrase by me of what he said. And he won't himself make the accusation that the other explanation must be true, but he will say that the official explanation is false.
Osama bin Laden is a Saudi businessman. Why not bomb Saudi Arabia? He has a lot of known holdings there, you point out.
Indeed, I mean, if anyone wanted to wound or otherwise interdict the Osama bin Laden empire, which is small but rich and is known to operate on profits of legitimate business, or is believed to be so run and is not known by me not to be, it hasn't been proved either, but let's suppose the allegation is correct. Well, the place to hit him is in Saudi Arabia. Now, somehow I don't see the United States landing missiles in Saudi Arabia without warning and saying, we don't like the look of this place, we're going to bomb it because it might be bin Laden's property or it might have some tie to one of his operations. I don't think the Saudis would wear it. In other words, all they're doing is expressing, yet again, total contempt for certain countries that can be used as sort of toilets of convenience. You can dump anything you want there and hit them with anything you like. in case of the need to rally public opinion for some bogus moment.
You also point out that there might have been a side benefit to bombing Sudan that many people might not have thought of, related directly to President Clinton's predicament.
There is in American politics, as you know, there's a thing called a twofer, a 2-for-1, and that's what all politicians really aim for. Clinton, we know, chose the targets from a menu presented to him, but he picked them himself. There is another reason, was put to me by a very clever anthropologist who works in Sudan, why he might have picked a Sudanese target or a target near Khartoum. Most Americans, I hope it doesn't sound condescending to say, don't know really much about Sudan. They don't know it's the largest country in Africa. They might not be sure of being able to find it on a map or saying much about its society. And, okay, that's fine. They don't have to know. But some Americans know a lot about it. In particular, the Southern White Baptists know a great deal about Sudan because it's number 2 or 3 on their list of hate countries. Not without reason, I should add, because it is in many ways a Muslim sectarian regime that oppresses Christians. So it's already got a bad reputation in certain parts of the United States, mainly among white Southern Baptists, precisely where Mr. Clinton was hoping to shore up his own political position at the time. You could almost call those people voters. And remember, this was late August.
And this was the Christian right.
This is, in effect, it's not the Christian right in the sense that we identify the Christian Coalition or some of the other front organizations that are around that, the world of Ralph Reed, but it's a culture not unlike, and it's very much identified with this act now being debated by Congress as to whether there should be a religious freedom legislation, which would, I think myself, just be probably a Christian fundamentalist law. So yes, that did bleed back in a strange way into American domestic politics too.
So let's end with Iraq in December, and what you see as the chronology in terms of, well, when the buildup really began, the last buildup in November, and how it relates to President Clinton's impeachment.
A remarkable thing about doing this article to me was the following, that though of course I was able to call on some people who have general doubts about the way that the military card is played, and people who've in the past expressed doubt about the way that should be done, that a number of the people who really didn't like this happening were people like Milt Berden, who could be described as a Cold War hawk with a very tough war reputation as an intelligence agent. And another person to whom I spoke, Scott Ritter, who's known to be the most inflexible in his opposition to Saddam Hussein of those gathered around UNSCOM, the UN inspectorate organization that monitors Iraq for weapons of mass destruction. Mr. Ritter impressed me because he says you cannot fool around with this kind of thing. If you're going to remove the Iraqi regime, you must make preparations, for a convincing strike or a threat of one that would cause the regime to surrender. And you must mean to follow through. Otherwise, he said, it's just immoral to torture the Iraqi people with sanctions, to make them suffer for the vices of their leaders. He says he doesn't think it's morally justifiable to have sanctions if you're not conducting a serious opposition policy. I think this is a sincere enough point. Mr. Ritter came to my attention, though, because he challenged the official version offered by the government, the US government, and Richard Butler of UNSCOM, of how the crisis with Iraq had occurred. The US government, having all year, for different reasons, not sought a confrontation with Mr. Saddam Hussein, in fact, rather avoided one, suddenly decided in a certain week in November that a confrontation must occur right away. And they said it wasn't their choice of time. UNSCOM had decided that Mr. Hussein was in violation of all the inspections. Well, that's not true. We now know that the UNSCOM reports were written, in effect, in the office of the US ambassador to the United Nations, that Mr. Butler made his findings known to the United States administration before he made them known to the United Nations. In that respect, I believe, violating his mandate, and in every other way helped to condition a crisis which the president could activate at any moment. And then the president didn't activate it. He was in Israel, coming back from a failed attempt at the already highly politicized and domestic politics-dominated Y agreement, with nothing to show for it, when he got the news that the violation can be established. We've got that. We've contrived it. So you can use it any time. He didn't use it that day. One could add that two important New York Republican congressmen, both of them at that stage standout possibilities for a vote against impeachment, were invited to join the party on Air Force One, which is a perk that most congressmen will, I won't say die for, but it's a very well recognized form of patronage, so that given the identity of the men and the timing of the invitation, it can't be said by even the most credulous person that Mr. Clinton was not thinking about domestic politics when he made this trip. So I think that, if you like, the preconditions are in place. He returns. He still has the violation. He's known since Sunday. You can hit Iraq any time you like, because you can always say they're in violation. That's, you know, we got that, and we gave you the knowledge early, and in fact, improperly. And he still doesn't do it until more and more all of these congressmen come off the fence, and it's going the other way. And then suddenly, as the Congress meets to vote to impeach, it's discovered that there's an emergency. Iraq must be bombed. The UNSCOM people are pulled out quickly so they don't get caught, though actually no UNSCOM inspector has ever been attacked by any Iraqi. The humanitarian workers are left just to face it as the bombs come down. The claim is made Iraq's been degraded. Well, that's true, but it's my claim that the United States was degraded by such an obviously contrived operation, and the inspection process is for now at an end and was destroyed in order to be saved, in order, in other words, to save Mr. Clinton's face. So this, it seems to me, is the third time, and probably the worst time that the most cynical form of foreign and defence policy has been used to understrap and justify the most cynical and corrupt practices on the domestic front. So I think, as you said the word twofer before, that really would be one of the worst twofers of all time.
Do you think President Clinton should be impeached for these reasons?
I think Mr. Clinton should be impeached for those reasons, yes. But I believe that those who say those reasons would be better than the abuses of power shown in the Monica Lewinsky and Catherine Willey and other cases are missing a small but important point. These abuses of power for which you should be impeached did occur as a means of distracting people, changing the subject away from what was apparently a more trivial or indecorous problem. In all cases, the practice and theory is the same: the lawless use and abuse of power.
Christopher Hitchens, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, nice of you to ask me.